This is the Discuss Metal podcast with Don Bastard of the Record Space, hosted by Dan Terry and Joseph Wren, presented by discussmetal.com.
Well, what's up, everybody? We are back on the Discuss Metal podcast. We have our very first in-studio guest, which is Don Bastard. He is in a band called Bastard Squad, and he also owns a really badass record store that is local to us, which if you are from St. Louis, you'll know that those are kind of in short supply. I mean, because we've got like 4 record stores in the area, and the ones that exist are either like Indier Than Thou, or they're
shit, dude, that was good.
Yeah, they're all old. They're all old shit. Like, you can find some cool stuff there, but you've got to have like 9 hours to look. You know, they've got shit everywhere.
Yeah,
and like
literally, it's in an old library, and they make use of the space.
Absolutely. I'm gonna start with a little bit of a story that I just told before we did this, but I was in the market for a new car, and I was driving with my wife up Gravois Road here in St. Louis, and I happened to see the store and told my wife, like, hey, we should stop, for a minute or whatever. And she's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go get this car that we have to get. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So whenever we didn't make a deal with the guy on the car that day, he wouldn't do it. And then we walked away, and then I called him the next morning and was like, yeah, if you want to sell that car today, you take, So he did it. So I got to go up there by myself. And so when I came back with the car, I was able I was able to stop in and check out the store. And I'll kind of turn it over to you, Don, a little bit. We're going to get into the Bastard Squad stuff, but the part of my curiosity is just how the store came to be.
Yeah. I started this store 2 years ago out of an antique mall. So the name Record Space actually came about because I was trying to figure out, if you built a record store inside of an antique mall, what would you call it?
Right.
So we had a room with a door and everything, so it was like my own thing. So I called it the Record Space because it was a space inside of a pre-existing business.
Right.
So that's how it started. The alternate name to it actually was Vault of Vinyl, which would have been a play on like Vault of Horror.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because I've always had the horror theme mixed in with the record thing. So it's not just records, it's also horror stuff is the two big things that we have going on there.
That's one of my favorite things about it is you can check records and tapes and CDs, and you have all that. You know, one of the things that caught my eye more specifically is I'm a huge Laserdisc guy.
Yep, Laserdisc.
And so just to have a store local that has a Laserdisc section that is organized, and gone through, and as a metal fan and horror fan, all those things I feel like are tied very closely together.
I feel the same way about punk rock,
and
metal and horror and all that. So, but so when I opened the store, I actually originally was going to have the store kind of in another business here. And it was going to be an offshoot of the Record Space where we were out in Poplar Bluff, Missouri.
Okay.
So I'm from St. Louis, moved out there with my family, opened that up, and then I was going to open one in St. Louis also. So I was going to have 2 locations. And then as that went on, I kind of realized that I probably should just open my own store and put all of it into one place rather than 2, spread out. So I found a place and opened it up and got it rolling. And just made it look like I would want a store to look when I walked in.
Sure.
The way that I do my band, it's, you want the music to sound like stuff you like to listen to so that you can listen. I like to listen to my own record. It's not, to me, it's not weird. You should be able to listen to it. You should like it, or why are you doing it?
Right, totally. And talking about that record, so this is actually going to be released with the store, like the store is releasing it, or does the store have like an offshoot label, or is they are they like one and the same?
So this, so we had a show that was I don't know if either of you guys went to it, but we had a show at Ready Room called Punk versus Metal, Bastard versus Bastard Squad, because there's a band in St. Louis called Bastard, thrash band. So I went to a show with those guys playing, and I was like, we need to just have a battle of punk versus metal, and for fun.
Sure, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Nothing negative there. And so we released a demo tape, and I decided that the tape would be released instead of through like a private release through the band. I would just release it through the store in an offshoot label called the Record Label.
Sure.
So oddly enough, that name's not taken. I actually looked it up. The only place that's ever used it was in the UK, and I was like, well, there you go. So now the Record Space has a record label called the Record Label.
Easy to remember.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we did the demo tape for it's called Promo 19, and it's got 2 cover tracks and 2 demo tracks, and then the record is called Bastard Luck, which we've been listening to, and it's 12 tracks, full-length record. So it's our first release, technically, the first full-length, and it's also the band's first release. So, but going forward, I'm going to actually be releasing other bands' records. So.
That's awesome. And you're releasing on what formats? Are you on CD or tape or both? Or
we're doing vinyl, CD, cassette, and digital.
Okay.
So every format, the way that I remember everything being released when I was growing up.
Sure.
Like you had an option instead of it just being just the CD or just vinyl,
Where are you getting your vinyls pressed?
So the records are being pressed at Precision, which is a record pressing plant out of Canada. And I think they outsource everything or do part of it. I think the records are actually pressed in the Czech Republic. And then they're made with that old style that a lot of metal records were actually pressed in, called direct metal mastering. If you ever see like all the old metal records say DMM stickers on the front, that's the way we had them done in the Czech. Then they're shipped to Canada, put together, and then shipped over to us.
Very cool. Now, with the band Bastard Squad, how long have you guys been around?
So the band started in 97, and then we were probably around for 6 months. And then we took a 22-year break.
Ain't that the way?
Right. So all we recorded in the 6 months was we have an original demo, which right now I'm going into the studio with this original tape and having it cleaned up, and we're doing some lathe cut 7 inches of it.
Okay.
Which is nobody knows this yet.
Okay.
This is
it's an exclusive.
Right. Yeah. And there's probably only going to be 20 copies, maybe. It's just some one-off thing I want to do to preserve that original recording.
Sure.
And finally give it the treatment I wanted to. We never released it. So it flash forward 22 years. And I was putting on the very first punk rock flea market, which is an event that I do every year. And I was doing it at my friend's bar, John, who owns San Lou. And he was the original bass player for Bastard Squad. So I was thinking of bands we would have on the thing, and one thing led to another, and I just asked him, hey, you want to try to do a one-off reunion show? And at that same exact moment, in a weird coincidence of fate or whatever, our drummer, who originally from back then had moved off to San Diego and New York, somehow came back to St. Louis at the same exact time. And I was told, hey, that guy's back in town. You want to reach out and see if he wants to do it? So I did, and he said yes. And then we played the show, and then we were asked to do another one. And then we started writing new material, and then now it's been about a year and a quarter.
Okay. So I'm going to jump back to 97 real quick. And, say, okay, so you guys were a band. You had an unreleased demo.
Yes.
And so how active was the band at that time as far as...
Yeah, we played a lot of shows.
I would think so, because if 22 years later you want to do a reunion show and then anybody to show up,
Yeah, we played... so I was originally from a band called Very Metal, which is a bigger known old school punk rock band in St. Louis. And then when I left, the band, I started Bastard Squad. So in the 6 months, we played a lot of shows. And I think one of our biggest shows we played was on the first Dropkick Murphys tour.
Okay.
They played at a place called Kennedy's on the Landing. And so, we tried to get out as much as we could. We would play anywhere, a basement, a coffee house, a show with Dropkick Murphys.
Sure.
Whatever we were asked to do or wherever we could get our foot in the door. So we played a lot of shows in that brief period and then recorded the demo. And... one thing, young, a lot of drinking.
Sure.
And everything came to a head pretty quick, and then we all kind of went our separate ways.
What was it like recording in 97? We didn't start until the mid-2000s when we could do everything digitally on a computer. Right. You had as much hard drive space as you could possibly imagine.
Right. So when we recorded, I think we recorded for $75 in a friend's living room. We played the demo entirely live, like our live show. And he had a sound room in the other room. That's all I remember. So it was basically thick carpet that I remember being sticky. And then we just blasted through 7 songs, and I don't even remember doing multiple takes. I don't remember much other than blazing through all the songs, and that was it. And then I was handed a tape, and that's the same tape I still have to this day. Oh, wow. We don't even have the original DATs or whatever they were recorded on.
We can relate to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
except our CD has multiple takes of the same demo.
Right. Yeah. No, and I mean it was always intended to be a 7-inch. Like that's what we wanted to do with it, but it was over before it began. So it just in a weird alignment of the stars, I guess. It just happened, and then it just kind of naturally progressed and kept growing, and the crowd kept growing, and everything we were doing just kept growing. So,
well, if you don't mind me going back a little bit further, what got you into punk rock and hardcore? And
so, I grew up playing classical music, and through probably junior year of high school, then I just basically listened to that kind of stuff with a little bit of pop music. Everybody listened to Michael Jackson in 1982,
Yep.
So
and 85,
right,
and 89.
But you get
we all did it.
Yeah, you get to about 88-ish, and Metallica releases "And Justice for All."
Yes.
And my buddy that lives across the street from me shows me this band that I've never heard of. And I can't believe it. Like I'm like, it sounds like a wall of guitars. And then, of course, later you find out there's no bass on it, which is why it sounds like a wall of guitars.
Right, yeah. It literally is that. Yeah, you were spot on.
Right. So, and it just blew me away, So then I told my uncle, and, of course, my uncle's a metalhead, and he's like, come on, dude. Like, you want to listen to that stuff? I've got all this, and he's got every, so. But he introduces me to Danzig. Because he knows I love the Doors.
Okay.
So he's like, yeah, check out Danzig. Danzig 2 had come out by that time. Danzig 1, Danzig 2 era. So 90-ish. And he's like, yeah, check this guy out. And I think you'll dig it. And so I start getting into Danzig. And then he goes, if you like Danzig, check this out. And he gives me a Misfits tape. And it's Misfits collection.
Right.
And so that's it. Once I hear the Misfits, everything was over. You're like, yeah, forget all this, dude. What is this world? This music's cool, but to me, it was like the punk rock stuff was just, it had that energy, and I was young, so it was like the metal stuff was cool, but I wanted that kind of frenetic. I had that energy, so it was naturally just went straight to punk rock.
Well, yeah, the energy is always the selling point. You know, it was definitely that way for me with hardcore.
Yeah.
Although I didn't get into hardcore until probably like after 2000 because I'm, a young,
yeah.
You were a late bloomer in metal, dude.
I was, and so for me growing up, there was almost no differentiation between hardcore and metal at that point,
Right.
But what I think was interesting is I think we all collectively as aggressive music fans, I'll say, we all have that kind of initial spark, that rejection of everything that you'd heard before, because you're like, well, this stuff is fucking great,
right?
And all this other stuff just sounds like it's meandering around. And I can understand too with metal, especially in the 80s and early 90s, it almost seemed a little bit too self-indulgent,
right?
Like, let me play this guitar solo that goes for 6 minutes or some shit like that,
and takes 27 takes to get the first 2 seconds of.
Right, and then the dude can't play it live because he's too drunk or whatever,
Right.
But yeah, with punk rock and hardcore, that is that was very much my bread and butter growing up, and it's so funny because when Joe and I were playing in a band, we were trying to come up in a St. Louis scene, and then we realized that there really wasn't one.
Right.
At least not in the 2000s,
right.
So you guys did Bastard Squad in '97,
and I was in Very Metal from '95, maybe the end of '94 till '97. So yeah, slowly building that thing up, and Very Metal was pretty big. We did a lot of shows and
I've heard of Very Metal. I didn't know that you were.
And then they went on to be a more aggressive kind of harder core band. When I was in the band, it was more like a drunk punk kind of.
Then it went kind of
thing.
more of a thrash kind of.
Yeah. And then eventually they turned into Head On Collision, which is the straight up thrash band.
Yep. That's perfect though. That's the evolution of punk rock, right? Like that's you start punk and you go thrash.
Well, eventually. and that's the thing with all of the, that the whole weird punk versus metal thing in the '80s. I never understood because you don't even get thrash without the punk. You don't get any of it without bands like Motorhead and The Damned, and all of that stuff have to happen first before you get Iron Maiden, and Venom and stuff, which then Misfits have to happen so that you can get Metallica and Slayer.
Right.
And and like the whole weird thing where people are like, "Oh, I'm a metalhead, but punk rockers, that's so lame." And you're like, "Well, no, you can't have one without the other." Like,
right.
You almost needed the punk rock to get to the metal, and then most of the metal musicians are into the shit, so
yeah, it's like a chicken and the egg situation.
Yeah, even if the only thing you ever listen to is Metallica, James Hetfield repeatedly says, seriously guys, motor breath, and we were taking punk rock energy and just playing faster.
Yeah. And I mean, you listen to those first two Iron Maiden records with Paul Di'Anno.
They're totally punk records.
Straight 1970s punk.
He's got spiky hair. He's wearing, bullet belts and studded belts, and I mean, he looks like a punk rocker. I mean,
yeah. Well, he was the polar opposite of Bruce Dickinson, who was, as I said earlier, kind of that overindulgent singer.
And they even tried to deny that. We never had those punk roots, and Di'Anno says they did. And and then Steve Harris says no, and you're like, all right,
you're like, I'm not deaf, I can hear the records.
Exactly.
If you're denying that, I think a lot of that too had to do with kind of as I said, the overindulgence of metal and the big arenas and the glam bands that were out. Because we're talking about good bands, like we're talking about like Slayer. Slayer, Metallica, Misfits, like all these bands that were like really great. But like you look at what else is going on at the time, Rat doesn't sound like it has a punk influence.
Everybody wanted to be Def Leppard.
But you know what? but Rat only happens because of Motley Crue.
Correct.
And Motley Crue has that. Nikki Sixx has said before that he was influenced by all the punk bands in L.A. And then, you've got Guns N' Roses, which straight up has Duff, who was in the Farts in Seattle, playing in a straight up hardcore punk band before he goes to be in Guns N' Roses. So it's all there. All those people are entwined in all of that, and even to this day, you still have that. The drummer of Stone Sour came from the band Nausea from New York. So, Nausea is like a hardcore political band that's like sort of, that whole scene is what sparked all of Antifa and everything that's political, all this hard political stuff. And and that guy's in Stone Sour, so I think it's always weaved in and out,
I think that's a good perspective to have too, because, it's kind of a scene, punk and metal are unfortunately infamous for spawning very elitist asshole type people.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Terry.
Yeah, I mean, I do a whole show about
I didn't say
it. It's fine.
It's my job to say it.
I say some shit that sometimes might be regrettable, but it is.
How do you feel about Pantera, Dan?
I'm not a big fan of Pantera, but anyway, I don't like tough guy shit. Like, we'll just get it.
I've never liked that either. Like the hardcore scene, that the New York hardcore, when it turned into like beating people up hardcore.
Yeah,
I was just like, what the hell is this? Like, this isn't cool. Like, I don't know. And it's bands who came up, creating the stuff that turned into it. And you're like, what the hell? And then Biohazard happened, and you're like, ugh.
What the fuck is this? Yeah.
Yeah, no thanks.
I'm tougher than you.
But of course, I don't. When you're a musician, I think you can hear stuff in anything. You can hear its merits. and give it its credit where it's due.
Yeah.
Phil Anselmo's a joke. He's a running joke in our band. We constantly are in band practice. Maybe sometimes a little drunk and talking. We'll just be like, "Fuck," because like live. I don't know why he does that. He just like fuck or smoke weed, and
he doesn't know where he
what
is.
The fuck it. This guy is crazy. One time, I swear, there's a video on YouTube. I'm pretty sure he says smoke piss. I don't even know what the fuck he's talking.
Smoke piss.
Smoke piss.
I believe it. So
anyway, that being said, the drums and guitar work on Vulgar Display of Power and Far Beyond Driven are fucking amazing. I mean, that's it. Like the records the vocals are terrible. The fucking lyrics are atrocious.
But now we're talking about the Darrell brothers.
Exactly.
No denying it. Now, have you listened to power metal?
And yeah, I have. Yeah, the hair metal.
So Phil can fucking sing.
Yeah.
He just stopped doing it for some reason.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I listened to Damage Plan too, and anticipated going to see that until that happened.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
We don't have to get into that, but
I didn't like it.
it
was kind of new metal. If
was.
Eddie Van Halen wanted to play it,
But again,
that's a compliment.
We've come back to liking new metal a little bit on the show.
Well, and that's the thing too is I never I don't believe in the guilty pleasure thing. I believe that you like what you like, and music. You get attached to it for whatever reason. I listen to Korn, Deftones and stuff, but I also saw those bands before they even had records.
Right.
I saw the Deftones open for Bad Brains, before they even had Adrenaline out.
Right.
I saw Korn open for Marilyn Manson on Danzig 4 tour, and Danzig and Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson had just had his first record out, and Korn hadn't had a record out.
Was this Spooky Kids or was it Antichrist Superstar?
The first one, the family one.
Beautiful Stories for Ugly Children.
Whatever the one is with the clay puppets, the clay
That's
stuff.
the one.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first record, yeah. So that was that tour. Danzig 4 was out, yeah. So
Right about that time then.
So, like some things hit you a certain way. Like White Zombie I always thought was boring. I never really liked them. I saw them play in 92 with Danzig, and I fell asleep while they were playing.
Oh, no.
Caius opened, and they were amazing. Caius is great. And then, but I appreciate White Zombie for what they do. No slight against them, but they just weren't my thing,
Compared 1-to-1, they're absolutely not as cool as Rob Zombie.
Right.
But if you believe Rob Zombie, it was his idea to incorporate groove into rock, which Faith No More gets credit for, kind of creating that 90s vibe. I'm not going to say new metal or rap metal, but epic is epic for a reason. You hear one note and you're already into it.
And when but Faith No More will go to their graves saying that they want no part of new metal. They were like, we don't care about these guys. They can go fuck themselves.
Come on, guys. We know you care a lot.
Right.
Well, and that's what's hard, like not believing in guilty pleasures. I had a very similar experience where we, with discography discussion, we've talked about so many bands. We're like 140 bands or something at this point.
Oh, wow.
Sure. Whatever you say.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch.
This episode comes out when again?
Yeah, I don't know. It could be different when it comes out. Yeah,
Got your back done.
Right.
But I think what's interesting is so I had a very similar experience where we did an episode on Limp Bizkit. And I going into it was like, oh fuck, I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to listen to this band. Fred Durst is this or Fred Durst is that, and this band is. And I listened to $3 Bill Y'all, I listened to Significant Other, and I listened to Chocolate Starfish, and I remember listening to it and being like, I don't actually if you don't really listen to the lyrics, I don't hate this. This isn't as bad as it's advertised to be. The amount of hate that went into that band was just
it was everybody being tired of Fred Durst,
and I totally understand that.
Yep.
But whenever I went back to it and listened to it in my 2019 years or whatever, I was like, I've heard way worse shit than this. I listened to fucking grindcore and stuff, so I've heard way worse records than this. Pig
Destroyer.
If you've ever heard Nickelback in the mall,
right? Yeah.
Jeez.
You've heard way worse.
Whatever, man. If I had the opportunity to play shitty songs like Nickelback and make as much money as they do, I'd do it.
Yeah, that's the catch-22 of that situation,
right?
Give the man credit; he found a way to make money at playing rock.
Yeah. But hearing those guys describe themselves on the point one time in a weird blanket interview that they just sent out to radio stations that the radio station would dub their part into the interview.
Yeah.
And he described his band as guys you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley late at night. And I was like,
I don't know, man.
To me, when you're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I'd say that more about the guys from Samhain, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
These guys, you're like, what? Yeah, you guys would what? Help me put my groceries back in my bag?
Right.
Like, you need help, eh?
I know he's not blind because he said he never made it as a blind man. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting how all that works. And so, you know, speaking to elitism or trueness or whatever it is, you know.
Right.
So, you know, Bastard Squad exists in 1997 for a limited period of time.
Right.
You guys take a 22-year hiatus.
Right. Because life got in the way. I actually raised a family in that time.
Yeah.
So I have, you know, a family of 6 that we grew up, and, you know, that's what I did. I kind of stepped away from everything.
Dude, are you sure you don't actually know how to time travel?
Yeah, no, I
Just
know.
checking.
Me and him just became best friends. Yeah. I'm going through the same thing because I had played music for a while and then raised a family, and we started doing the podcast just so I could be like, I got to have some kind of stamp on music,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, see, I mean, I had a few things here and there, projects that, you know, never really got off the ground or went past practicing in my garage. And then the kids started moving out, and you start to realize that I'm, you know, 40, 41, and you're like, well, what do I do now? Like, I guess try to do some of the shit I used to do, which I put on pause to raise a family. Now everybody's healthy, you know, teenagers, and you know, my son's going to be 21 in January, so you're like, you know, let's do this. And unfortunately, that might clash with what you had going on as far as your family life. So it caused some ripples, and one thing led to another, and, you know, I ended up back in St. Louis, and
Right.
now I do all of this full time, and, you know, it's the record store, the band, and endless events. From a movie night I put on every month at Heavy Anchor, which is called Cinematic Chaos.
Put that on the calendar.
Yeah, we're actually showing
Right next to Late Night Grindhouse.
Yep.
Yeah, so Late Night Grindhouse is actually this next weekend coming up. Well, on the 7th and 8th of December. I don't know when this will come out, but and on the 17th, Tuesday the 17th of December, we're showing Ernest Saves Christmas.
Nice.
Very nice.
Right.
That's
so
awesome.
it's a punk rock themed movie event. All of them have been, you know, it's Night of the Comet, Night of the Demons. We showed Decline of Western Civilization and Suburbia and stuff like that.
I tried for so long to get him to show Street Soldiers at a Late Night Grindhouse. It's been a few months since I've been able to actually go, but you know, I've got all these obscure movies in my brain from when I was a kid, and my mom had a friend who worked at a distribution house in California.
Nice.
So I have a stack of promotional VHS tapes of these weird movies that exist somewhere, but they are hard to find today.
I'd love to see this stack. That's pretty cool.
So if you can imagine this movie made, I think it's made in Germany, but it's about Los Angeles teenagers who have their own gang who fight a group of guys who were in a gang when they were teenagers, and bloodshed ensues.
Why are we doing this fucking interview? Why aren't we just watching that movie right
Can
now?
we just watch that and talk about? So is it Greasers versus punk rockers?
Greasers in the 90s, so, you know, Letterman jackets, and we go to high school. Like, legit.
Weird.
We just go to high school. It's called Street Soldiers. It's
Greasers in
amazing.
L.A. in the 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, we got to watch that movie.
Yeah, that's.
Well, we do have Movie Mosh, so, you know, it can still happen. We just launched a movie podcast where we talk about weird movies.
Fucking
and
dude, we're talking about
Yeah.
punk rock. I'm putting on Sam Hain.
Yeah, well, now
Yeah.
I have a place I can
Sam
go.
Hain is always appreciated. Yeah.
Now I've got a place that I can go and pick up those movies too. You know, so
Yep.
that's cool. But you know what I was getting at with the whole, you know, you take 22 years off, you come back, and you're like, okay, I want to do this band again.
Right.
You know, what is you know, you look at the current state of punk rock and hardcore, and you put this record out. Is this the record that you always wanted to make, or is this
We
kind of just taking newer influences? And
we didn't think of it like that. More so, I keep saying that it's organic. I didn't feel like we were trying to do anything. It just all happened. It seemed like everybody was kind of on the same page when we were writing the songs. So everything progressed. And we wrote about a song a month for the first year-ish. Not even, I think I gave us a cap of the end of March was like when we were going to be done. So whatever we had by the end of March, and we went into the studio and recorded 16 tracks in 2 days, which was really ambitious.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I thought, well, we're going to do it like you used to do it, and we're just going to go in live and just start hammering it out. And we did that, and then we realized that, well, no, that's not exactly how it works. And you know, we had to go back and kind of fix stuff. A guitarist left. We picked up 2 new guitarists. So we made it a 5-piece, and then we finished the record and redid all the guitars and everything. But we kept the drum and bass tracks because they were perfect.
Where'd you guys record?
Encapsulated Studios in Maplewood.
Okay.
With Gabe Ussery. And he records everybody.
Very nice.
He's so solid. I mean, if you've heard the record at all,
yeah,
that's a credit to him. You know, like when that was like one of those things where you listen to it after it's done and you're like, this is what we sound like. Like, what kind of magic did you work? Is this a different band?
All I did was turn the mics up, man. You guys did all the
work.
You're
like, you took my vocals because I remember singing it,
right?
But yeah, you put it over this other band, yeah.
Yeah, no, and it blew us away. Like the work that he did. I mean, it's incredible. And I was just letting a friend of mine, you know, fellow St. Louis local musician guy, listen to it today in the shop, and and his assessment was, you know, that in his mind, I'm not saying this from me, but he said that he thinks the record sounds like everybody's going to have to step up, and it raises the bar on what everybody's been doing right now. Maybe in a local level, I don't know, but you know, just in punk rock in general.
I did some work a couple years ago for Perfect People. I don't even know if they're a group anymore. Grew up with a guy who was doing lead vocals for him. That was my introduction to hardcore punk. The idea of the band gets up there for literally 20 minutes, plays 12 songs.
Yeah.
Minute and a half, you're lucky if they even have 2 verses.
Right.
And I didn't know that existed.
Yep.
Because I'm a Clash fan. Late 70s.
Right.
Throw the Samhain in, throw the Misfits. Motorhead, absolutely. So I'm used to it at least somewhat resembling a song.
Right.
Oh, no, there's a whole different group of cassette-obsessed 90-minute sets with 5 bands playing that I never did that. I was always preparing for the 45-minute set list.
Right, and so we kind of teeter between the two. Like, if you look at our record, I think there's 3 or 4 songs that are all about a minute. And that's us touching into that thing, which is what Bastard Squad was in the 90s. More, you know, quick fire stuff like that, 1-minute songs than you were, you know. Then, of course, when we start with all the music knowledge that we have since, it's almost like we're starting to get to that. It's 2 minutes 30 is kind of like the comfortable point to making a nice song. You've got all of everything you need in a 2.5-minute song, you know. And then, of course, on that record, we actually have a 5.5-minute long song. So, which also feels comfortable, and nobody ever seems weirded out by a 5.5-minute long song by a punk band. But, you know, we just kind of do our own thing.
Well, and it's
without worrying about all that, you know.
Nothing against anybody. The times have driven us to the 10-song records that are 30 minutes, but I always enjoyed the punk albums that were, they're 30, 35 minutes, but there's 12 to 15 songs on there.
Yeah, we got 12 songs in 29 minutes on ours.
I miss the longer records. I really do. I understand why we don't have them, but I miss them. I miss this idea that, there's a few deep cuts in here instead of 1 or 2 deep cuts.
Right. And it wasn't intentional to to keep the record short. I mean, like I said, we had 16 tracks when we went in.
Right.
And, 3 of them were covers. We actually did a cover of Cro-Mag's Hard Times, which is on the demo tape, and Numbers by the Addicts. And then we did a cover of Misfits, I Turned Into a Martian, which it hasn't been anywhere yet, and we're actually saving it for a special release.
7-inch single?
Possibly.
Cassette tape I find on my doorstep, maybe?
Yeah, so so we it was 13 songs. We cut 1 and ended up with what we had. But it basically came down to when we wanted to go in the studio and putting a time cap on what we were doing. So whatever we had at the end of March in this year was what we were going to go in the studio with. So, no more time. we had what we had, and of course, going into what we're doing now, we're already, I want to say we're a good 8 songs deep, and we haven't even really started. We've got 2 that we're working on that will be ready for the record release show, which is coming up December 28th, and then we've got a whole barrage of songs that are ready. So by the time we get to studio time this time, we're actually going to have a large pool to pull from and do something fun like an EP or something in between this record and the next one.
Way to keep 90s pace. You're already preparing for the next album, and the new one hasn't even come out yet.
No. And that's, I don't know. I'd love to be the type of band that can release a record every year.
That would definitely be really cool. And something that I'm kind of in the dark about that you may have be able to shine a little bit more light on.
Yeah.
What is the current punk rock or hardcore scene like in St. Louis now? I mean, like I said, I'm a dad, so I don't get to do much.
Right. To me, I feel like it's thriving. There's a lot of bands. Everybody seems to be doing well. Everybody's recording, most of them at Encapsulated with Gabe. Lots of records coming out every year. And we play with as many bands as we can, and we put on our own shows and events. So we'll pull from this large pool of bands, and everybody, like I said, it's a good time. There's no real, the one thing in the 90s, there was a lot of aggressiveness, a lot of negative energy, and that's not there anymore. I don't really feel the negative or the, nobody's trying to fight anybody. Nobody's at war. We're all everybody gets along. We all play together. And there's a variety of punk bands from, garagey punk stuff that sounds like rock and roll, garage type, all the way to, the Cherokee Street basement show, kind of like that they would hate if you called it crusty, but, like the crust punk stuff is still around. It's just changed a bit,
Yeah.
And, right. That's just what I call it by default because that's what I was into in the 90s, But yeah, it's vast and there's a lot. So, and everything's great.
So do you feel like Bastard Squad coming back was remembered by people, or is it more like you're just out there with the new bands, as a new band?
It's been a mix. We have heard feedback from a few people that'll be like, oh, I saw you guys back in the day. I remember that name or whatever. But most of it is everything that's been built in the last year and a quarter, just kind of starting over. It's a brand new band, so we're treating it as if, we just started. And, and the progression has been great, and the growth and and we appreciate everybody even caring, enough for us to feel like we should release a record,
Sure. Do you think that the camaraderie that exists now in the present day is more just that, these styles of music aren't necessarily out there to push as far as they possibly can anymore? Because back in the 80s and 90s, the punk bands would start playing as fast as humanly possible. Right. Everybody was trying to be faster than everybody else.
Right.
And then, sometime in the 90s, everybody's like, well, I'm fucking chunkier than you are.
Right.
So I'm going to fucking lay down crunches and shit. And,
right, yeah.
And then you had these weirdos that were all like, well, I'm just going to play dissonant shit. Right. And it just, up, one up, one up, one up, one up, one
right.
up. And so
I feel like it's all of that now is there. And everybody's doing their own unique thing. It's not, nobody's trying to
outdo.
No, it's not like that at all. It's everybody's trying to just be their own thing, and there's no, I don't see the competition thing. To me, there's no competition. It's just we're all there to have fun,
Sure.
And what would you be playing this for if you weren't enjoying it,
Right, no doubt, yeah.
And whatever is if you get a crowd, you get a crowd, and if you don't, we'll play a show in front of 5 people. We have, it just is what whoever shows up, and you appreciate even one person caring.
Sure.
And or one band wanting to share the stage with you, So,
well, and I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit since we're coming down on the last couple of legs. One of the biggest things about the shop that really pulled me in was not only an awesome diverse record section. I cannot stress how great it is for somebody like me to go into a shop that actually has shit that I like.
Right.
You know, like that's the hard sell.
Right.
But the other thing too is the horror aspect of it. I know you guys sell video games too, which we could talk about a little bit later. But the horror aspect, like you have a whole horror section.
Yep.
And you know what got you into horror stuff as a kid? I assume it's as a kid. Nobody's like, I started watching horror when I was 33.
Yeah, no, it was when I was a kid, and I remember my earliest horror memory has to be seeing the other than maybe like Thriller, everybody saw Thriller, but like more like I remember being really remembering seeing the box art for Halloween at Mr. T Video in St. Louis, like just seeing that and what is that, and your parents are like, you don't want to see that.
It's unpleasant.
Yeah, don't watch that. And then of course it was that. And, things like Ghostbusters and Gremlins when you were a kid were acceptable, so you could watch those things. And Channel 11 used to show horror movies on the weekends, so I would watch those whenever you could be up and nobody would catch you staying up watching horror movies all night, double features or whatever, or even movies like Penitentiary 3 and
oh shit, yeah.
Shit like that. Like your Channel 11 showed some pretty gnarly shit. I think I saw Night of the Comet on there for the first time. But yeah, that and the movie Repo Man really helps a lot of it. That actually, so when I was growing up, I actually lived in St. Louis and Los Angeles, back and forth a few times. My dad always wanted us to be in Los Angeles for whatever reason. He wanted to live in California, so we'd go out there and they would try it every few years as I was growing up. So of course, like all of that K-Rock stuff, Night Flight, Rhonda Shear's Up All Night, stuff like that, the weirdo movies. And then of course Repo Man was like just a dub tape that we had at the house that I could watch whenever when I was growing up. And that's kind of probably a lot of it. The Repo Man really, if you can get into Repo Man when you're young, you almost like it's like an open door to get into anything.
Oh yeah.
And so it was like Star Wars and Repo Man. And then of course, when get into the horror stuff, and then when you get to be in your teen years and you get all your buddies around and you go to video stores, you're like, what can we rent that's the most fucked up shit, and that's when you start going, seeing all the shit. That's how we saw Evil Dead 2, shit like that.
Yeah, I watched Repo Man for the first time with my dad, actually. It was definitely one of those, like, don't tell your mother, kind of thing. And it's not even that Repo Man's the most fucked up movie, but it instills this love of weirdness in you. Yeah. That other movies really couldn't capture.
No, and I'd say that, I always say this, but my top favorite movie of all time is hands down Repo Man. And my favorite horror movie of all time is Creepshow. I actually think, I know a lot of people will say The Shining. Sure. The Shining is great, but Creepshow, it's also like that. It's like Repo Man. It's a weird movie. It's got, interesting atmosphere and elements that other horror movies just didn't do, And
well, it's fun, too.
It's fun, yeah. And that should be, Repo Man's also fun. You know what I mean? It's chaotic. It's punk rock. It's fun. It's crazy.
It's also fun watching the edited for TV dub. I almost enjoy watching that more because
the Repo Man one.
Yeah. Of the weird edits. It's the first time I heard Melon Farmer.
Alex Cox actually said that he wrote the script for the TV edit, and so he actually wanted it to be that, like those silly, alternate cuss words. It was all him.
Yeah. It's hilarious. It's just like, hold it right there, Melon Farmer.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Hilarious to me. And that was the version that I watched because I think Dad and I watched it on TV. And, my dad was always really cool. We grew up really religious.
Right.
And it took me about like the first 7 years of my life. My dad was like the most terrifying human being I ever met because he was like a combination of super religious, super strict, and then, but like, I remember...
You going to mention the bullets?
Well, we'll talk about that later, but that's a whole different podcast. But no, I remember hitting like 7, 8 years old, and I was like walking around the house because we had nothing to do. We were like deeply religious, so we had no TV. Like they were anti-TV, and like my sister couldn't cut her hair and shit. And like it was crazy. And what was funny is I'm like wandering around the house because I got shit else to do, and I find my dad's old record collection. It's like shit like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and Boston and stuff, and that was the very first time like my dad was like, you can listen to these, but like not when your mom's around. And that was whenever I was like, oh, okay, so he's actually cool.
Right.
He just is trying to shield me from stuff, I guess, as a kid, Right. And but yeah, so we started doing is like I went to bed at like 9:00 every night, and then my dad would stay up and watch whatever fucked up shit was on. Like that was after they decided the TV was actually fine. Right. And so he'd stay up and watch these late night horror movies and stuff, and or just weird B movies. And one night I got up at like 10:00, and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "You want to watch this movie?" And I was like, yeah, of course, because you're like 8 and it's your dad, and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's do it, And
it went just like that.
Yeah,
fuck yeah, Dad.
I didn't say fuck yeah, Dad.
He's like, get the fuck back to bed.
Are we gonna see anybody get fucking disemboweled tonight? Yeah, like Well, it became that way after a few years of doing that.
Of course.
But we watched Repo Man, and it was just the most, because that movie is so fucking surreal in places. Like that's the thing that really grabs me with that movie is you cannot predict what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like you start off watching a totally different movie than you end with.
Mm-hmm.
And that instilled a love for me, especially with like B grade movies. Like you figured out after a while that the movies that you liked the most weren't good.
Right.
Like in the traditional sense, they're not going to change anybody's life or worldview or anything like that. But that I loved those kind of movies. They were
ambitious, though. Mm-hmm. They took chances that most other directors or writers wouldn't take because they're afraid, or the studio would say no.
Yeah, they took risks that their budget could not accommodate for. Yeah.
Well, and that's still the way I feel about film to this day. Like my favorite stuff is the stuff where people would the director, or the writer, or whatever, would rather take the chances than take the easy way out. For instance, my personal favorite director right now that's alive, I always say this, I make a distinction, alive, because George Romero is dead. So I can't say George Romero is my favorite living director anymore. But Guillermo del Toro is amazing. And he made Shape of Water with $16 million. It looks like it's got $150 million in it. He didn't pay himself. He did everything as cheaply as possible. Everybody, was in on the event to make it happen. And that's going against the system. That's doing it the way that you feel it needs to be done so you can get the result that you want.
Right.
Which is what Alex Cox did with Repo Man. He was doing his, and I appreciate that. All of that to me can go into making the film experience even more, amazing. All of the what goes into a thing, rather than it just being like, oh, these guys just had unlimited money and could make whatever they wanted,
Right.
When it comes to horror, I love James Wan. He is the only living director that can actually scare me to this date. It took me a good 12 years, because it only recently happened, where I could sit down and watch a James Wan film and kind of know what his pattern is.
Right.
But everything up until now, like, I still question if Insidious is truly the scariest film ever made. But I wasn't alive when The Exorcist was a new thing, so I feel like it's an unfair comparison.
Yeah, and that is true. Like, I actually personally think that, to me, the most effective creepy horror film I've ever seen was this movie called Session 9.
Bravo.
And
holy shit. Okay.
So Session 9 is, to me, is...
We're not talking about the deleted scenes, right? Where they kind of change the plot.
No, that's bullshit.
Yes. Thank you.
That's just pure bullshit. The movie, solely, the reason why I feel like it resonates, the creepiness, is because of the fact that you don't really understand what the fuck's going on. And then even when you get the understanding of what the hell's going on, you're like, wait, was this a ghost? Like, is it a supernatural, or is it just a psychological movie? It's got these layers, and also it's shot in the Danvers Mental Hospital, which was actually, falling apart at the time when they shot it. And when you watch the documentary about the movie, they're talking about how all this really fucked up shit happened while they were filming it. Like, so it was legit creepy for them too. And I feel like that comes across in the movie. Like, you feel it,
It does. The first time you watch it, it's paced.
Yeah.
Painfully slow.
And the voice, the overdub voice stuff, the reels, the deterioration on the the voice when it's talking on the tapes, all that stuff plays into it because, horror is all about sound. Soundscape is 100% how you even get a creepy horror film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre doesn't really have a creepy sound track. It just has a lot of creepy noises.
Ambient sounds.
Right.
Yeah,
which is why it's unnerving because of the bone breaking stuff, like that stuff. But it's all sound. That's what it comes down to. It's part visual, but mostly it's the sound and the soundtrack, the score, or whatever. So.
I love that you brought that movie up. Joe and I, it's one of our favorites.
Yeah.
Like it's absolutely one of the best. And it has an unintentionally hilarious line that we could not ever stop repeating. Where he's like, "Hey, Gordon.
Yeah.
Fuck you."
Yeah.
Like it's just like, and like it's not that funny. It's not that funny with me just saying it, but like when you watch it in the movie, it almost stands out as like almost the only comic relief moment in that movie at all.
Dude, if you went to YouTube right now and played the clip of "Do It, Gordy," seriously,
Do it, Gordy. Yeah,
Do it, Gordon.
Do it, and it's like louder than the rest of the movie, and it's just the way that they made that sound. It's terrifying even to listen to right now. If you play it in
what
these
leads up to it is even worse.
Yeah. All of the movies, it builds and it's perfect. Like, to me, it is the quintessential creepy horror film. And then, of course, if I go back further, my next favorite creepiest movie probably is The Changeling. Which I feel also effectively builds exactly the same kind of creepiness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here it is.
Oh, he's playing it. Okay. Oh, yeah, we could do multimedia on the podcast. I forgot.
Do it, Gordon.
You forget how bad it is.
See? That it's just weird sounding. It's the way that they made.
Well, you knew that was going to happen.
It's just there's something. But that movie does that, and the same way it is when you watch Cannibal Holocaust for the first time. It's built up as this disgusting.
They killed a fucking turtle, man.
Yeah.
On screen,
and it's brutal. The movie's brutal. And the visuals are brutal. The soundtrack's brutal. Everything's brutal. But it's also one of my all-time favorites. It's not. I don't think it deserves the disgusting hate it gets. I think that it's actually a legit film that's actually well made.
Totally.
But it is gross. I mean, that's the point of the movie. What happens if you get eaten by cannibals?
Right.
It's not pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's definitely, that's awesome. The Changeling is also one of my favorites. I just, it's so funny you say Session 9 because we didn't buy it. We rented it, I think.
That's back when Blockbuster was still a thing, man.
Yeah, and me and my buddy Mike and Joe would go up to the video store and we'd just go pick out the most fucked up shit we could find. And I remember actually making fun of Session 9. Because I was saying some elitist prick thing about like, oh God, what is this? This is probably some fucking made-for-TV bullshit movie that doesn't, and Mike's like, no, I think we should get it. And I was like, no, that's $2 whole, man. I don't know if I can scrounge that up, and all this shit. And we took it home and watched it, and we were just like, at the end of the movie, we were just like, oh my God, like what the fuck did I just watch? And then we watched the deleted scenes and we were like, fuck those deleted scenes.
That's such bullshit.
This movie that's actually a good example of though, like they deleted those scenes because they knew it would make the movie suck balls.
Yeah. And speaking of Juan, he wrote and directed the first Conjuring. And so the Conjuring is probably, if you were talking in the last 10 years, the Conjuring is probably my favorite. One of the creepiest movies. To me, Insidious is great, but I always thought Insidious was too clean. The atmosphere, there's no the building that it's like an apartment and it's like everything's clean and I guess that's creepy in its own way. But I always like the old period houses or like everything's falling apart. So like it's an element like why Session 9 works for me. But I give The Conjuring, is the 2. I didn't really think did what the first one did. I think they relied too much on trying to build a dumb universe with putting all these characters in there that they were going to spin off into different movies.
Yeah,
which felt really heavy-handed. But the first one is pure awesome horror.
Well, that was made in the same house, I thought. He made another movie in that same set, and they basically just painted the house.
Oh, wow.
I might be thinking of Insidious 2, and I just don't realize it. All
the Insidious movies to me are cool. was Insidious 4 the key?
I believe so.
I like that because Lynn Shay is the star. And, she's like the co-star, but
right.
She never gets her due, and she's great.
Well, we caught him in 2004 from the original Saw. I found a synopsis online, read the first paragraph about two guys chained up in a room, and that's the whole movie.
Right.
Called him, said, "What are you doing right now? We got to go see this movie."
Yeah, I was watching everything as it came out. I still do that. I know that a lot of these horror movies, modern horror movies, are going to be terrible, but I still go to the theater and see them on opening night if I can. And I did the same thing then. I saw, House of a Thousand Corpses on opening night. I saw 28 Days Later, American Psycho, anything that I could get, go see. And I saw Saw, and then I never watched another one. Because
having sat through all 7, there's only one that you need to watch.
I felt that Saw was more in tune with a procedural thriller than it was a horror film. When they were selling it early on, the trailers they just kept showing the creepy doll on the tricycle, and they kept acting like it was a true horror film. So when I went, I thought I was going to see a horror film, and then you see it's more like a cop, thriller. Mystery, and you're like, well, this isn't really a horror movie.
It's one of those movies now.
What is it? Shyamalan style plot twist at the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always think that, I know that everybody just lumps thriller mostly into horror, and I always feel like there's a big distinction because the way I always looked at it was, this could be wrong, but horror is supernatural or monsters or things that can't happen. And
yeah, I agree.
Thrillers are reality based. So slasher movies are thrillers. They're not horror films. But a monster movie is a horror film. You know what I mean? Because a thriller can happen. That's like on the edge of your seat. Well, the killer's gonna get, like
the difference between like a Michael Myers versus a Freddy Krueger.
Right.
Where Freddy Krueger, it's all deeply in fantasy.
Until you get to Halloween 4. And then it's like, or Halloween 3, of course, is a horror film. But because that's
Season of the Witch.
Yeah, Season of the Witch. So, but 1 and 2, and then you get, after that, it turns into a succession of, now Michael Myers is a monster.
How annoying was that, though? Because, I loved the idea of Halloween being like an anthology type series of movies. So, I was hoping every Halloween movie was going to be a different story.
Yeah.
Kind of like what American Horror Story does on their seasons, where it's a different, and that show's very hit or miss, but it's, when it hits good. I love anthologies. Going back to what you said about Creepshow, it being an anthology of horror. And what I actually like about shit like Creepshow is that it's still fun.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. I talk so much shit about cheesiness in music.
Right.
But I love cheesiness in movies sometimes.
Right.
And I do feel like with modern horror, that's kind of starting to become lost.
Yeah.
There was a movie Joe and I watched, last year or maybe it was 2 years. It was when the video game store closed right before that. What was that movie called? Do you remember? Fuck. I'm blanking out bad.
They're still out there.
Destroy the Skull, or I don't remember if it was called Destroy the Skull or not.
Crush the Skull.
Okay, yeah. So we watched a movie called Crush the Skull, and it was not a good movie.
Right.
Let's not mince words here, but it was hilarious. There were so many fucking jokes in the movies where it's like, oh my God, the cops are outside. The first thing they're going to say is get the fuck on your hands and knees and don't move, fuckhead, or something like that. And then the cops show up and they throw them on the ground and they're like, get on your fucking hands and knees. Right. Don't move, fuckhead. Or it was just so funny.
I think Tucker and Dale versus Evil did a good job with that. Shaun of the Dead obviously did.
Yeah.
And then more recent, Tusk. Kevin Smith's horror films have been great.
Loved it.
Yeah, I don't even, and I'm biased with Kevin Smith, so Yoga Hosers is fun to me. I don't care. Again, he's another guy that does exactly what he wants, doesn't ask for permission. And when he tried to get into the Hollywood system, it just didn't work because it's not in his blood. That
right.
Cop Out was a piece of crap. It's got some interesting things, but it's not a Kevin Smith movie. It just feels like, he was trying to appease something or get into the system,
Well, it's like with these directors, they're like, yeah, here, make this movie. You've got infinite money.
Right.
But with every single dollar, there's a fucking caveat.
Right.
You know, like, okay, but you can't do this.
Right.
You have to do this. It's someone else's money.
And then another movie he did with like Zach and Miri Make a Porno, which he did thinking he would, I've got Seth, Rogen, and this is going to be a hit. And you're like, yeah, but the one thing is that it's still a Kevin Smith movie in the end. So even if you have all the elements and he makes it true to him, it's still only going to resonate with the Kevin Smith fan base, which I think he figured out now. Now he's kind of figured out, like, I have a fan base. I don't have to try to reach farther because, other people just aren't going to get him. His reach can only go so far before people are like, yeah.
His best movies are always when he has something to say.
Yeah.
And talking about horror movies and thrillers, Red State
was amazing.
Yeah. This movie that he wrote because his brother is gay and he doesn't have a problem with his brother, and there exists a group of people in the world that fundamentally will actually tear you down
protested his things. Yeah, they actually were outside. I was there at a couple of his events when they did that stuff in Kansas City.
But watch that movie visually. And Dave Klein gets to move that camera around, and all of a sudden you're there.
And that was also Malcolm Ingram was his buddy who kind of sparked that idea. If you listen to any of his podcasts, he talks about this stuff endlessly. But that Red State is fucking amazing. I mean, it's brutal too. That opening scene with the kid tied to the cross, and they put the plastic around his face, and they shoot it in the top of his head, and you just see the plastic filled with blood, and you're like, "This is a fucking Kevin Smith movie." Like, the fuck is going on?
Right?
Yeah. No, I can agree with that. Having a gay brother and being raised in a predominantly religious household.
Right. Yeah.
None of that was easy for him.
Yeah. No.
None of it. And that movie definitely spoke to me.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. And it's weird because when you think about Kevin Smith movies, you're not like, oh, that movie spoke to me. But like when you really think about it, like Clerks even is as dumb as Clerks is, it's a movie about being content with what you have.
Right.
Like it has a message and it has a meaning. And I feel like with these more mainstream Hollywood movies, you don't get that. It's just, how do we get butts in the seats?
Yeah. And and all the people are always beautiful and glamorized. And Kevin Smith's people are not. I mean, it's almost like maybe like I would say like a nerdier version of John Waters. John Waters definitely focuses on like the kind of the most gnarly people, or like and it's cool. Like Waters he's definitely one of the forefront of independent filmmaking. After dudes like Ed Wood and shit. But
So are you saying Pink Flamingos is a thriller?
It definitely. I will say that Pink Flamingos is thrilling.
There it is.
Terrifying.
It's but Waters tried to play in the system too, and now he doesn't make movies anymore, which I think is it's your downfall. When you try to appease an audience or a system, and then you're like, and then that goes back to what we're talking about with the music too. Like. You can do that, and if that makes you feel good or you want to make the money or whatever, but, in the end, people will eventually figure it out, and then, you get called a fucking joke, and then you get invited to play a black metal fest so people can throw rocks at you, which happened to Nickelback, so.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That was obviously intentional. Nobody accidentally booked Nickelback at a fucking black metal fest.
Do you guys want to hear some rock and roll, or you guys want to go home?
Yeah. Everybody's throwing rocks at you, dude. Like
fucking walks off stage. That's the very first time I've ever felt really bad for Chad Kroeger with his millions of dollars. Like it's just
that was a setup. That had to. Somebody was like, "This is going to be amazing."
Somebody just wanted the YouTube video.
Yeah,
they just wanted that to go viral.
What's that user account again? It says Dan FT.
No, it wasn't me. It was not me, but I wish it was me.
But I feel like do you? If other people like it, then and that's the store. That's everything that I do. To wrap it all back around to what we're talking about here is from the store to the band to the movie nights to doing this podcast. I mean, it's all just doing things that you feel is all part of what you feel who you are and representing who you are, period.
Totally.
That's it. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, no, man, I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us tonight. This was fun. I like having fun conversations about things that we all can collectively enjoy. I think one of the things about our society nowadays is that everybody is so defined by their stances or their way of life. Like, what the fuck are these metal guys doing talking to this punk rock guy?
Right,
you know what I mean? Like,
anything like that.
But then, we sit down and we have a conversation and we realize actually that we have a lot in common.
Yep.
And that is the essence of this show, and the essence of what we try to do is we're trying to build relationships and build bridges, and we all love the same shit, and if we don't all have each other, then what what do we have? And but yeah, guys, the Record Space, if you're local to St. Louis and you're listening to this podcast, check them out, guys. This is an awesome record store. Even if you're not there for music, you can find awesome movies there. You can find video games, toys, memorabilia, cool shit.
Yeah,
I think that you could have just called the store "Cool Shit" and that would have been on. You
can watch a live band. You can stop in and just have a conversation while we stand around watching Godzilla.
Totally.
It's meant to be a hangout.
Totally.
So did we need to have Movie Mosh at the Record Space with Godzilla?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And if you guys ever want to pick a band, I would obviously pick the Misfits if you want to go that route.
Yeah, we could probably
put that on the schedule for next year.
Yeah, we could probably make that happen.
Coming in 2020.
Or really, I would probably say Danzig's career is what I would probably focus on, because I feel like a lot of times the artist's career is all encompassing. I don't see it as different. It's just all steps. Whether it's Danzig or Morrissey or whatever,
Sure.
You go through the different bands and the eras, but it's just getting to, it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
But other than that, if you guys, the record comes out December 28th.
Bastard Squad.
At the record release show is at the Ready Room. Hopefully this goes up before then.
I'll make it happen for you.
We can make it happen.
And so the Ready Room, you can come to the Record Space and get tickets. You can pre-order the record there or at our Bandcamp page. If you go to bastardsquadstl.com, there's all the links for you to every single thing. Give us a like, give us a listen, see what you think.
Very cool.
But December 28th, our first record, and
22 years in the making.
Right. And and we're gonna play the record in its entirety at the show. And the show's actually split the music stuff we got going on. We've got a kind of metally, hardcore, crusty 2 female vocalist band playing. We got a straight up hardcore band. We got a party band, BASSAMP and DANO, Redbait, Brute Force, and us. So it's gonna be a good time.
We will have links to all of it, guys, in the show notes. Check out the Record Space. If you're not local, check out Bastard Squad.
And you can check out Record Space on Discogs and eBay, and give us a like. And if you see something on Instagram, hit us up and tell us you want it, and I'll ship it to you.
That sounds like an amazing
deal. I've been
deal.
doing that for 20 years.
You're going to be like, Dan, what the fuck? You could have just drove up and got the record. Why you asked me to ship it to you?
Actually, I've delivered records to people I know.
Save on postage.
Yeah, if you hit me up and you're like, hey, I live, I can never get over there. You want me to drop something off? I'll do it.
Dude, I've got no excuse. So, I live down in I can literally go on Highway 30 and drive straight to the store. There's no...
I feel that it's a convenient location. It's on Gravois. Gravois runs through the heart of the city.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's a straight line. Get on Gravois and take it out, and once you get a half a mile past the city, you're at my shop.
Right.
And really, it is the city. When you're that close, it's not. It doesn't feel like the county. It's just
for us county guys, us suburbanites.
Yeah.
It's not that far out of your wheelhouse.
No.
But you're gonna feel like you could be like, hey, honey, I went to the city today. It was, it was real rough. I bought a bunch of Godzilla DVDs and action figures and shit.
Yeah. And Afton isn't Alton. A lot of people think,
no doubt,
that Alton is where you're like, no, that's really far away. That is half an hour or 45 minutes. But
sure,
yeah. Afton, my address is St. Louis, and so I say it's in St. Louis.
Cool. This will probably not be the last time we talk. So.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah,
and
anytime
I'll do. This is fun.